We got you stuck off the realness, the most infamous, you heard of us. Official podcast murderers, the show comes equipped with viewpoints to share. Grown man ideas for all those who care and wanna grow, so go ahead and download. Every single week with a brand new episode. You're not alone in this world, cousin, so we share information and honest discussion and keep repping a culture like we supposed to. They spread gossip, but they never come close to. I can hear it inside their tone. They talk about the industry, but never left their home. You get laced up with bullet points and such, plus empowering topics that they never would touch. You can put your whole network against a team, but Super Duty Tough Work's the MVP. Most valuable podcast on MP3. Priceless info, but all of it's free. So take these words home and think them through. Super Duty Tough Work is coming at you. You are now listening to Super Duty Tough Work with your host, Blueprint. Raw and uncut. Adult conversations. No shucking, no jiving, and no bullshit.
Super Duty Tough Work. Special guest this evening, Rob Viktum. What is good, my man?
Yo, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on. It's been a long time since I've done an interview on the show, and I've been watching the moves you've been busting. And I was like,
well, thank you.
Why is this man not been on the podcast? You know, it's because I haven't done interviews in like 2 years on here. But in an effort to get back to doing interviews, some of my favorite people to interview are producers. You know what I mean? Because obviously I'm a producer as well. But I think there's so much interesting stuff going on in the space that I wanted to kind of bring you on, because I feel like you've got your hands in quite a bit of different things. And you're a very well-rounded producer. And so I wanted to bring you on today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rob Viktum. He is a producer. He's an engineer. He's a sound designer. He makes sample packs, drum packs. Gosh, let me think. What else? You DJ, right?
Yep. That's where it all started.
Yeah. I'll say record collector. I don't know how serious your records may be.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
NPC Akai enthusiast.
I appreciate the name of the brand, maybe not the brand, but yes.
Right. The legacy of Akai, you know, and he's a well-rounded producer, and I'll tell you my how I heard of Rob Viktum, which you probably already know, is I get a call one day from Mr. Dibbs, and he's like, we're talking about something. He's like, hey, you heard of Rob Viktum? I was like, nah, who's Rob Viktum? It's like, he's really dope. You need to fuck with him. He's got some shit, working on some shit together. And if you know, anybody who's listening knows how Dibbs talks. That's dead ass Mr. Dibbs right there. I was like, okay.
That's the most accurate voice I've ever heard anyone say besides himself.
That's Dibbs, man. Hey, Pringle, you need to call Rob Viktum. He's fucking dope. You guys would make some great shit. And so I can't remember. That was a while ago. That was maybe like it was before 2010, I think. Or was it around 2010? Was it return of 2010? When was it?
Probably.
Okay, because it was a while, and I was like, so obviously, like I started checking for your work then, and
it was Scribble Jam era.
Yeah, Scribble Jam era, because I think the last Scribble Jam was 2011. I think was it 2011? Yeah, it was 2011 because we performed at it. I was on tour with Atmosphere, and I think that was the last one. But he kind of introduced me to your work, and I've been following you and listening to your music as well. And you've got an interesting story as far as like your production, your family, and everything like that. So I'd like to start from the top and just kind of get into like, what was your introduction to music, and what kind of role did your family play into that?
So both my parents were musicians. My father was also a playwright, but my mother, classically trained pianist. She played piano up until the moment she died. My father, avid drummer, incredible guitar player. But my mother was like, this boy is going to play piano. So they threw me into piano lessons, and I hated it. I hated it. I thought it was the stupidest shit ever. They made me be in band and all sorts of wild shit that I just, in hindsight, helped me later on in life, but I absolutely fucking despised it. And I thought it was just absolutely atrocious, sitting in this room with this old lady teaching me how to play piano. And it's just relentless things over and over and over, learning the keys, learning chords, learning all of these things. And I hated it. I hated it. And my dad, around the time I was probably 8 or 9, my father introduced me to hip hop. My pops, and he gave me a record. It was Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5, and I loved the reason he got it for me is because I absolutely loved this movie called Beach Street.
Yep, classic.
And I had it on VHS, and I would wear that motherfucker out.
That's great. That's
and
awesome.
I had to, and my dad picked up on it, and he figured out, all the things behind it. And he got me, the the Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5 record. And it kind of started from there. And maybe a couple of years later, we were in New York because of my father's playwriting and shopping plays and things of that nature. We were in a record store in Midtown, and I randomly picked up this record. It was a CD at the time, but I picked up a CD. Where's it, a tape? I don't know if I can remember. But it was Gangstar, Daily Operation. And the moment I heard that, and I listened to it, I knew that everything was different and changed. And instead of a piano, I moved to turntables and an SKS sampler, which was a little Casio keyboard thing.
I remember that.
And a 4-track tape recorder, and I started trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah, I think I'm one of those people whose first sampler was that Casio as well. With like 3 or 4 seconds of sampling time or something like that. It's very short.
And had that little lion. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what upon hearing that, did you kind of just go down to like, most people it kind of sends them down the rabbit hole of where did this sample come from? Did you go down that rabbit hole, or was it just straight to like, I want to make beats?
It didn't start off that way. I just soaked it all in. Like the second I realized who DJ Premier was, he was the guy that was making this music behind this guy that was rapping. As soon as I realized who that was, that's where I dove.
Okay.
I was like, okay, and that's when I found the other 2 records that came out before that one.
Yeah.
And I just kind of started obsessing over what we call boom bap now, and I dove in, and it wasn't until I was probably 12 or 13 that I realized, oh, this is a thing. Like, there's more to the DJing than just being the guy behind the rapper.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that what producing was until I was a little bit older. And that's when the SKS came into play, and that's when the 4-track recorder came into play. And DJing became second.
Yeah.
To me learning how to chop samples.
Nice. So like, what was your progression as far as like gear? Do you remember like what were your first 2 or 3 purchases?
So after the SKS, which the SKS was given to me by my father, because my father he was a collector of junk, and he had that 4-track Tascam tape recorder, and I knew that this was not going to cut it. I was like, something like this does not sound like what that sounds like. So
Yep.
what's the deal, you know?
Yep.
But this was back in the day where there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
There was barely a mention of it in magazines. So it was one of those things like you had to be around it to know about it, right? And so I would hear rumors of this thing called an SP-1200,
Mm-hmm.
this illustrious magical machine that had a whole 10.2 seconds of sample time. And I was like, man, God, what I could do with 10.2 seconds of sampling time. And so in my younger years of hustling and figuring out how to make money, we won't go into a whole bunch of that. But
Mm-hmm.
I, at that age, probably around 15, 16 years old, I started saving the money. And by the time I was 17, I got an SP-1200.
Nice.
And I was in this little bitty shithole Texas town
Mm-hmm.
called Amarillo, Texas, where I went to high school. And there was a music shop there. Like they sold guitars and drums and all of that stuff. And I walked into the place and I said, I want to buy an EMU SP-1200. Do y'all have those? And this guy looked at me. I felt like, you know, when Pee Wee Herman walks into the biker bar
Yep.
in the first Pee Wee movie?
Yep.
That's what I felt like.
Like the record stops.
Yeah. They're like, who's this fucking kid? But then he brings out this catalog and it's like that thick, bro. It's like that thick. And he's like, what's it called? And I say, it's an EMU SP-1200. And he starts thumbing through it. It's like he's going through a newspaper. That's the kind of paper it was on. And he goes, EMU SP-1200. This is one of those drum machine samplers. And I go, yep. And he goes, you want this? And I go, yeah. And he goes, you have the money for this? Because it was at that point, it was still like $1,800 or something. And I was like, I got it. And he was like, I'm gonna need to see it. And so my young ass was stupid. And I was like, here. And he was like, okay. So he gets on the phone and he calls the company, whoever the magazine company was. I don't remember who the hell it was. And he ordered it. And it felt like 6 months later, it shows up to Amarillo, Texas. And then me having no one around me, I had to figure out how to learn that machine.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the challenge of that era. It was that, like you're saying, I remember, because I think I started making beats in 96. And like you're saying, there was no internet. There was no community of people, no YouTube to just look up how to do things. So you would sit with gear. I imagine you probably spent weeks, months just sitting there trying things, having no idea, because you couldn't just call your homie and be like, yo, how do you chop on this?
Yeah. I had no idea about the 45 speeding things up until way late in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Till after, like, I mean, we'll jump into it at some point, but how I got my name.
Yeah. So how did you get in there? You got Rob.
Well, so and this is a day in infamy for me. 9/9/99, the day the Sega Dreamcast came out.
Wow.
I went to Circuit City. You remember Circuit City?
Yes.
Okay, I went to Circuit City to pick up the Sega Dreamcast. That was the day it came out. And while I was there, someone broke into my studio and stole my SP, stole my 4-track recorder, stole all my recording equipment.
Damn.
Left my turntables and my records. They had no idea that that's where the heat was. But stole it. And when I got home, my mother was there, and I was like, what the hell's going on? There was a bunch of cops and shit at my house. And I was like, what's going on? And my mom goes, hey, someone broke into the house. Everyone's fine, but they broke into your studio and stole some of your stuff. And at the moment, I was just like, well, at least I didn't get my Sega Dreamcast. Because it was in the car. It wasn't in the house yet. And so the officers kept referring to, you know, they were on the radio and talking back and forth, the victim, the robbery victim, blah, 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 blah. And it hit me, like several years later, like what is it that's really kind of defined me? What
Mm-hmm.
is it what was the turning? Because everyone has that moment,
Yep.
that turning moment that changes everything. And that was it for me. Like,
Mm.
if that person not stolen that, I wouldn't have been like, you know what? I'm a robbery victim. I'm Rob Victim.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have started on my path with the MPC 2000 XL because the
Yeah.
SP 1200 wasn't a thing at that point anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how it all
That's
came into
crazy.
play.
So that was like your radioactive spider moment.
Yep,
Just
that's
like
where I got bit. Yep, yep,
That's awesome. I never knew that's where you got the name from. So
yeah.
what kind of got you towards like the MP? How did you progress there? Was that just like, if I can't do this, I'm gonna start messing with that?
So once again, here's a moment where my father comes into play. My dad was smart enough to have musicians insurance
Mm,
for the house,
yeah.
and my stuff was covered.
Wow.
Like, the intuition of this man was incredible because I
Mm,
didn't think anything, like,
yeah.
18, 19 years old, or 18 at the 17, 18. You don't think about shit like that. You don't think about, like, the future, what happens.
Yeah.
And the reason is because he'd had multiple guitars stolen
Mm,
from him, and he knew that it's something you need to have. So the insurance company starts getting involved, and I'm like, I want my SP 1200 back. And this guy is looking for things, like, there's an actual part of the insurance company that actually hunts down music equipment. That's all they do. And I don't know if that's still a thing, but it'd be cool if it is. But anyway, uh, he's like, look, there's no SP 1200 anymore. You can't buy it, and that we don't buy used things. We only buy new things. He goes, but the comparable thing nowadays is something called an MPC 2000 XL. And he goes, for what that SP 1200 costs, you can get this MPC 2000 XL fully loaded.
mm,
So, like, I had all the RAM, I had the 8 outs, which was impossible to come by,
yeah.
and that sweet floppy disk. And when that came, just because I learned so much about the SP 1200 when the MPC came in, along with some of the money that was left over, I bought a Korg Trinity
Okay.
keyboard
Mm-hmm.
because I thought that was the coolest shit ever. It was not, but I figured, like, well, this thing, it had, like, I want to say it was like 45 seconds of sampling time when it
Mm-hmm.
was fully maxed out. I don't quote me on that, but I don't remember how much it was, but all the RAM in it made it, like, ridiculous, especially if you sampled in mono.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started diving in, and like, well, wait a minute, like, you can you can do so much on just one pad. Like, I don't have to have 2.5 seconds on each pad, and like, that's when it really started to come into, like, me understanding production
Yeah.
and kind of figuring out who I was behind
Mm.
the boards.
That's dope. So during this time, what were you doing, or were you still like applying or doing anything with like the music theory and stuff that you had learned that your parents, or were you just strictly, I'm just sampling now. I'm just boom
I
bap.
was just sampling, but I did have, like, I get keyboards here and there, and I
Yeah.
would add things on top of the samples because sometimes it just sounded really flat to me. And I was like, there
Okay.
needs to be something underneath this. But it wasn't, and at the time, some of that stuff, some of those keyboards, the sounds in them were so cheesy.
Yes.
So you have to learn how to, like, adapt some of that stuff. So I would put it into the replacement 4-track recorder that I got, which was like that blue Porta Studio thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would record chords and things into that
Okay.
and resample it from the tape because it made it way more dirty.
Yes.
And that's how I learned how to layer things on
Mm.
the MPC, because just standalone, it just didn't make sense. It
Yeah.
just sounded too clean and weird.
Mm. So from there, what are the steps, or what happened that kind of got you towards releasing music for the first time?
It's a good question. I would say, the path goes from seeing like disc makers.
Yeah.
Remember disc makers?
Yep. Yep.
I remember seeing art, like ads for disc makers in the Source. And I was like, oh, you can put out your own shit?
Mm.
Like you can put out your own records? But like the amount of money it cost to do it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, like you get, it was like $4,000 to release 1,000 CDs or something
Yeah.
back then. It was crazy. And so you forge relationships with people that maybe not the greatest individuals, and they fund things, and then you put things out and hope that the money comes back to them.
Yeah.
I had a few people like that in my life, but it was one particular group, and I can't remember their damn name, but they put a CD out, and where I was living,
Mm-hmm.
and this smallish town, and I was like, if these dudes can put something out, I for sure can. And I started looking for people to work with, because like I started making beats, honestly. Like I started making beats because I wanted to rap.
Okay.
Like I was like, I can DJ and I can rap, Rapping just didn't last. I just
Mm-hmm.
thought I just had a terrible voice for it. And I didn't have the patience, but I had patience to sit around and listen to a record for 6 hours and chop it. But I didn't have the patience to write anything down. But I knew that there was no way that I was going to be able to just put out beats. At least that's what I thought. I was
Yes.
like, I'm just going to put out beats.
Especially in that era.
Yeah.
And that's why I
Yeah.
asked, because like I always find like the guys in that era, your path as a producer seemed to be typically to find someone near you who raps really good, form a group, or produce for them, And so your path has always seemed a little different. So I was always wondering, like, how did you kind of get towards like, oh, okay, I'm just going to put out music now, because it's always different for each producer.
Yeah. For me, it was like putting out beat tapes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that that's what I was doing at the time, but putting out beat tapes and trying to find people.
Yeah.
Like through AOL Instant Messenger, that was a thing.
Yeah.
You could find,
Message boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, and I ended up finding this kid his name was Jay Vick, and he was here in Texas. And this is when I found him in Texas when I was living in New York for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we just started working. And then when I moved back to Texas in order to take care of my mother, when my father passed away, we just kind of hit it off and started making music. And he was like a rapper's rapper. Like he was a certified spitter.
Yeah.
And I thought my beats were the shit at that time. They weren't, but I thought they were real dope, and he thought they were dope. So we just started working, and that's kind of where the idea of putting out music kind of happened.
Okay. Yeah.
When you finally have a product that you think is decent.
Yes. Yeah. I find it kind of wild that like you have like Jay Vick and Rob Viktum come together.
Called the brothers Vic and Vic.
Okay. I was wondering, like, this is some serendipitous shit to come together.
It was so corny, but he could spit, bro.
Yeah.
He could spit.
Nah, that's dope. That's dope. Okay. I want to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about just like getting into sampling and compositions, like what kind of led you there. So we'll take a break and we'll be right back, folks. This is your weekly reminder that we have 2 books that you, as a listener or watcher of this podcast, need to absolutely own. The first is The 10 Traits of Successful Hip Hop Artists, and the second is The Social Media Cheat Code. Both of these books were released within the last year. The 10 Traits of Successful Hip Hop Artists is a book where I go through the stories and explain the traits that are behind the success of some of the biggest names in hip hop today. The book has got nothing but amazing feedback. And if you are an artist, business person, whatever you do, if you would like to be inspired and would like to learn more about hip hop along the way, and also see some reinforcement of the concepts that we talk about on this podcast, The 10 Traits of Successful Hip Hop is for you. Second book is The Social Media Cheat Code. That is for everyone who listens to this podcast who does not consider themselves an expert or really good at social media. It's not for super experienced people. It's actually for people who are on social media but are not getting the results you need. So what we did is I broke down like 12 or 13 strategies that I use all the time that actually work really well for me. I put it into book. I gave you examples and I tell you how to implement it. That's a book you absolutely need as a listener to this podcast, watcher of this podcast. If you're on YouTube, supporting these books actually goes a long way towards supporting the podcast. So to support the show, if you like what we do, obviously we don't necessarily get paid to do this shit. So support the products and services that we create. And these 2 books are a big part of that. We appreciate your support, and back to the show. What's up, everybody? Got some big news to share with you all today. I'm proud to announce that for the first time, I will be opening up my artist coaching and consulting services to the public. I have been doing it for several years behind the scenes, helping artists and small businesses achieve their goals, but it's never been something that I made publicly available, nor anything that I promoted until now. So if you're an artist or a small business owner, I'm now available to be booked for one-on-one sessions designed to help you achieve your goals as quickly and as efficiently as possible. If this is something that you're interested in, email me at superdutytoughwork@weightless.net. Tell me a little bit about yourself and we'll get the ball rolling from there. I look forward to working with you all. Peace. All right, folks, we are back. Super Duty Tough Work. This week we have producer, DJ, sound designer, sample pack creator, Rob Viktum in the house. And I hope you guys are enjoying this episode, especially those of you who aspire to do production of any sort. I think Rob is in a lane that a lot of producers should be looking at, because not only does he make beats, he produces for other artists. He releases instrumental records, he releases compositions, and he releases drum packs. All very good, ones I have bought long before this conversation, which speaks to the quality of them. And one thing I want to talk to you about next is kind of like, what made you, there were definitely people who kind of pioneered like the sample pack thing. It seemed, but they were mostly drums at first. You have drum packs, but you have compositions as well. What did you see that made you want to get into making samples and sample packs?
So, you being a producer, you're aware of like library records.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I remember the first time I heard like a Bruton record, and thinking to myself, like, what is this? Like, this is different. Like, this is not. There was something different about those records, and those are records you just you stumble upon unless somebody's pointing them out to you. And I remember thinking to myself, like, because at the bottom it says for TV usage or film usage, things like that, and you start putting together that these are the musicians that make music for like film and TV.
Yep.
And so you start looking for those specific records, right? And at a certain point in your music producing career, you figure out this thing called sample clearance. And sample clearance can be a little tricky.
Yeah.
Not as much anymore, but it used to be kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And we used to try to get away with all sorts of shit. And at a certain point, those library records were fair game.
Yes.
Because nobody owned them.
Yep.
There was a moment in time where nobody was in possession of those records. There was no masters. There was no nothing. That has since changed.
Yep.
But it was free game. And so that was when that was the first time I realized, like, look, I think there's some value in being able to create things for producers.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's sounds that you want, like you could sit in the studio and you go, you know what, I want to make a beat like blah, 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 blah. And so you start digging through records and start digging through records, and you could dig for 6, 7 hours and not find the sound that you're looking for. So what I started doing is I started using things like Reason and keyboards and stuff that I have around the house, and just multi-tracking stuff,
Yeah.
just goofing around and trying to make things that sounded evil that I could murder people to. And, using minor chords and finding different kinds of progressions with those chords and making it sound gross. And
Yeah.
then how do I take that and use it?
Mm.
And so before there was like sample packs, I was learning how to make samples for myself. And it wasn't until people started putting out drums, and then even, like full compositions, that started happening maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. Right.
And I think it was Frank Duke's Kingsway.
Yep.
When he started doing it, that's when I was like, okay, there's a lane for this. And that's when I started working on the Kersey and Castle stuff.
Yeah. So, and leads me to my next question. What made you decide to initially say, I'm going to go Kersey and Castle instead of your producer name?
Because I didn't want to give up the sauce. I didn't want people knowing where I was getting some of this stuff from, right?
Yeah.
If I had alluded to who this was, then they would be like, oh, well, he's been doing this kind of stuff for a while.
Yeah.
And at first, I didn't want to do that. So I took two of my favorite characters in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
I took Paul Kersey from Death Wish, and I took Frank Castle from The Punisher.
Nice.
Kersey and Castle, and I branded it.
Yeah.
And I started working with the Drum Broker.
Yep.
And that's kind of where everything started popping off.
Nice.
And then it was kind of stupid because like I had to promote it. It's my
Right.
product if I don't let people know that it's going on. And so it just kind of worked itself out to the point, like where I was at a certain point when Drum Broker and I split ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, if I don't have that name behind things, I need to at least have my name behind it.
Yes.
Because Drum Broker has this, like it has a big name for that world. So in order for me to make a business out of this, I needed to put everything behind my own name.
Yeah.
So Kersey and Castle came right back down to just me being me.
Okay. Now, did you learn anything about just like branding and doing that outside of?
Oh, for sure.
So what lessons did you take away from that?
I learned that video is so important nowadays, even in that world where you're just selling samples to somebody that's going to be sitting in their bedroom chopping things. If you don't make it visually appealing, doesn't fucking matter. No one's ever going to listen to it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But if you think about it, it started at the very beginning of our digging. The first time I looked at a dope record, I was like, ooh, I bet there's some heat on this.
Yeah.
Even if there wasn't, there was something visually that attracted me to that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not even realizing at the time, that's kind of what, drives everything. So shout out, Drum Broker for, linking me with the artist that put out most of the covers for my Kersey and Castle stuff at the time. The visuals were fantastic.
Yeah.
And you have to keep up with the visuals in order to portray, and so the cover work as well as the promotion work, including, like I was I can't tell you how many YouTube channels that I dove down about, DEA busting drug dealers and shit that I would steal footage from and chop up and to put into promo for, like whatever pack I was working on at the time, and then use that as a promo video with the beat, with the samples behind it. And I learned during that time how important visuals were to
Mm.
everything. So branding, if you don't have a good brand,
Yeah, forget about it.
at least visually, forget about it. It's not gonna.
Yeah, it makes
Nowadays, it
sense.
won't pop.
Yeah, it makes sense because you're right when you refer to like how we make decisions when we're buying records. The cover and back cover is very important.
Yep.
If a cover is whack, we don't want to touch it. Like we're like, because it has to evoke something in us, and so it makes sense. Because you're right. Like all of the guys who are successful in that space have great artwork.
Yep.
You can't be successful over there without great artwork and a great visual side. It's very,
Yeah.
very
You got,
important.
and like you have to spend money to make money,
Yeah.
and that's I learned that too.
Mm. Yeah.
Sometimes
So
those packs only broke even,
yeah.
because it's just like the record game,
Mm-hmm.
just like making, putting records out. People got to make their money before you make any.
So real. So real.
Now I pretty much do everything. I do
Yeah.
everything in house. I design all the artwork, all the everything. I do it all. I
Yeah.
do all the I do all the videos. I do all the artwork. I do everything myself. So I'm only paying myself.
Right. Right. Yeah. So when you've got, I counted like 31 different packs out on your site. Um, for an average sound pack, let's just say like compositions or something like that, start to finish, how long does something like that take you to create?
That all depends on the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, if you see me on a run and I'm putting out records, like records, like I got stuff dropping left and right, you're
Yeah.
not going to see a sample pack from me
Yeah.
because I only make sample packs when I am in a rut making
Mm-hmm.
music. It gives me inspiration to do things. So when I'm putting out records and I'm diving in and I'm chopping, all of a sudden there's a couple days where it just doesn't happen. I open up Ableton, open up some contact plugins, jump on the Moogs,
Mm-hmm.
and just start laying stuff down. And then usually packs just happen from that.
Okay.
So to answer your question, timing wise, typically if I was to sit down, I can usually do two or three compositions a day.
Yeah.
And so, it usually takes me about a month or so to put together a whole one.
Yeah. So what about the engineering side of it? Because we all know that obviously there's a musical side of writing things that, like you talked about, like those minor keys, those things that make us feel like, oh, that's ill. It's edgy.
Yeah,
What about the engineering side of making it sound like something we want to sample? How much study and time do you put into that?
it's a lot. It's a lot, like you study what you like, like I would study those Bruton libraries. I would study Hawkshaw. I would study his work. I would study, I would study Bob James. I would
Yeah.
study all these people that we just David Axelrod.
Yes. One of
Like,
my favorites.
yeah, like
Maybe my
these
favorite, probably
people
top.
were, genius, and you study how they invoke emotion through their chord progressions
Mm.
and through the types of instruments that they used. And this goes back to digging. This goes back to me looking at the back of records or inside of records and seeing what kind of instruments are being used.
Mm.
If I look into a record and I see that there are multiple Moogs, multiple Yamahas, if there's a Yamaha CS80,
Mm-hmm.
like the joint that Vangelis used for Blade Runner, if I see that
Yep.
on a record,
Cop
instant
that.
cop, instant,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know. But when you figure out what those machines are, that's when you figure out how they're making those records and how you can use those same records to tweak your own style, but help with that vintage, quote unquote, vintage vibe. And
Yeah.
then it's up to you to figure out how to make it sound like a record.
Right. Right.
And there's multiple ways to do that, but um, you got to make it sound like it's something worthy of sampling.
Mm. I like that. So Gosh, I had another question that popped into my mind. So, how much of like do you subscribe or time did you spend just strictly imitating records? Because I think I asked that because many producers they seem to think that imitation is something they shouldn't do. They think they're supposed to be original all the time. And I try to tell younger producers that one of the best ways to learn a particular style is to sit down and try to recreate it. You know what I mean? And eventually, through learning the mechanics of that style, you'll start putting your own spin on it. Is that something you spent significant time with the library records? Just like I like this song. Can I make this thing sound like that?
Definitely. You know, there's a record that I put out, the sample pack I put out called Smuggle Anthems,
Mm-hmm.
and that one's heavily influenced by a what was the name of the library? I can't for the life of me remember, but it was one of those ones that I was listening to multiple times,
Yeah.
and it gave like this 80s dope dealer flying things in from
Yeah.
into Miami vibes. And I definitely, like studied that one specifically to figure out, like I wouldn't say borrowed chords or anything, but you
Yeah.
can borrow the vibe, you know.
Exactly.
But you're absolutely right about, like imitation leads to creativity. Like if you can't I'd be lying if I said I didn't make a billion fucking DJ Premier beats when I was like
Oh, exactly.
19, you know? But you're right, like you eventually figure out what your lane is and how you create your own thing. And it just kind of happens. There's nothing wrong with imitation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And because like I have like guys I work with who are producers, like I coach sometimes. And one thing I try to do with them is I deliberately give them homework to imitate certain aspects of certain producers. And they get excited about it. You know what I mean? It's like you would think that they're like, oh man, I got it. They're like, oh really? Yo, check this out. I think I did it. Like, I'm really close. I'm like, hell yeah, you fucking killed that. That's what I'm talking about. And inevitably, that thing that they heard from having to do it over and over again to really understand that drum pattern, they can start applying it to their shit. And I start hearing the growth and the progression. And I think it's something that like it's even more difficult just making compositions to me because it's like the beat is just everything just thrown in at once. It's just real concentrated. But when you're talking sample packs, that's a whole different world. Let's talk about your drum packs. Now, the first thing that impressed me about your drum packs wasn't number one, a lot of original patterns. You know what I mean? Like a lot of drum packs, they do have the predictable patterns. We don't have to talk about them. No disrespect.
Yeah.
What I found about your drum packs, though, you have some kind of unconventional patterns of your drums. And the second thing is the sonics are fucking clean as shit. But it's not clean like pop record clean.
Yeah.
It's like library record clean. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What's behind that?
That's my father. My father, like teaching me real early about how drums work.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about microphone placement. It's all about how do you take, sometimes it's a shitty room.
Yes.
Like if I could show you this room all the way around, like this room is not very big.
Yeah.
And so when drums get put in here, it's a little wild. And so a lot of the sonics and everything are just because of shitty sonics in the room, but if you think about it, back in the day when people were recording and like the original drum breaks that we were picking, like there was no technology behind that shit.
No.
These guys didn't know that if you put you could make some crazy snares by putting a fucking, they were putting towels on top of snares.
Yep. Yep.
Like there's no technology involved in any of that.
No.
So the sonics behind it just at one, pure luck.
Okay.
Pure luck. and 2, studying to try to figure out if this is, like if this is something that's going to work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So how
yeah.
long so because your father obviously played drums. Were you playing drums back when did they make you take drum lessons too, or did you just like drums a little? You picked that up on your own over time. Man, that's
Yeah,
impressive. Impressive. Your drum breaks sound great. Really great, man.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So when you're doing your drums, have you ever heard your drums on anybody's record, and how does that make you feel?
Yeah. It's awesome. It's a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Um, the emails that come across when things get purchased
Yeah.
always make me giggle.
You're like, oh shit.
Oh, yeah. I've seen there's been some, there's been some names that came across that were like, Jesus,
Yeah.
I remember specifically the day that you first bought something. I
Yeah.
think you bought a lot the same day.
Yeah, that sounds like me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
and
got a
during
lot of
COVID.
issues.
It was
Yes.
during COVID. I remember specifically, I was like, I think that's print. I'm pretty sure that's print. And you were actually the first one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put anybody's names out there, but there have been many after you.
Yeah, that's dope.
But I also have like real close friends that I give the stuff to too, So
Yeah. That's awesome.
like my well, we won't go. I don't want to put anybody out there, but
It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
yeah, it feels good.
Yeah. I wonder
Feels
about
good.
that. Yeah, it's because I wonder about that. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, that's gotta feel fucking great. Like, have you ever got to the point where something like you didn't know someone bought it and you heard it somewhere and you're just like, oh shit, I think that's mine. You had that moment too. How the fuck does that feel?
It's troubling, right?
That's true. Cause yeah, you didn't know. Yeah.
You didn't know, but it's also free game because I'm not out here, like unless it's on a major label.
Right.
I'm not asking for any splits or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Use it, have fun with it. If you put it on a major, I want in. But other than that,
Yeah.
I don't care. And it wasn't a major, but the person who produced is a big deal.
Mm.
And I heard my drums and my compositions.
Oh. So what are you doing? What are you doing that? Do you hit them up? They say, hey man, it's me. Just want to introduce myself.
Yeah.
That's my
and
stuff.
Sometimes they respond and sometimes it's a lot of people, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but a lot of people have teams that curate stuff for them.
Yeah.
So there are producers out there that are getting sample packs and stuff through their management, and they don't know anything about it one way or the other.
Yeah.
And they're just, using stuff. And I would assume that's how this particular situation happened. Considering, I don't know. This person is very thorough. So, it's very possible that they're aware. But you can reach out and, some people will respond and some people just, you won't hear anything about it.
Damn.
And some people, you're like, I don't know how the hell to hold this person.
That's real. They're so high up there. You're just like, you don't know where to begin.
Yeah.
That's wild, man. So like, in your opinion, based on just like what you've seen, how much sampling at like the higher levels is of guys sample packs like you versus records now? Versus like, do you think it's the sample packs are starting to make a big inroads in that area?
That's a very interesting question because if you look at services, when I say services, there's only one service that does this. TrackLib.
Mm-hmm.
You look at TrackLib, people that put out sample packs, their stuff is on TrackLib or their stuff is on Splice. And so it's so much more readily available. And it's curated to the point where you can be like, I want a minor chord, I want this feeling, I want this feeling, I want this feeling. And you can just download it directly to the computer and sample it from there I think it's probably a 50-50.
Yeah.
I think it's a 50-50. Also, like, I think I saw it on TrackLib. I think you can unlimited sample clearance now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
$200 a year.
Yeah.
Unlimited.
Crazy.
Like, you don't have to do any of the fucking work. They handle it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that kind of pushes the regular sampling
Mm-hmm.
as much as the not having to clear sample packs. I
Right.
think it kind of evens itself out. On the indie level, like, there's lots of street rap shit out right now that's just straight sample packs.
Mm. I had the same feeling too. Where I'm listening to someone, I'm like, wait a minute, I know that fucking,
Mm-hmm.
I know that fucking composition. You
Yep.
know, that's fucking, or that's fucking, what's the kid's name? New York Cats. I'm going blank on her name right now. But there's like, you know how it is. It's like 5 or 6 big guys. And
Yeah.
if you heard their shit, you're like, I think that's them. Or I've got that pack. That's them.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, in your opinion, what are the biggest benefits why people will use your pack versus the others? Like, I have an opinion, but I'd love you to kind of explain it to like the listeners why a sample pack from somebody like you might be preferable over just sampling a record.
One, I'm not going to take you to the ropes for using my shit, but two, like, I have a genuine love for this. I have a genuine love of making dark, melodic, boom bap shit. Like, this is, I literally bleed this. Like, this is what I grew up on. This is 100% me. And there's no imitation in what I do. It is just me. So I think, the authenticity of the spirit behind it, along with the fact that I use my own stuff, I think, not that anyone else is inauthentic, but I challenge myself every time I'm sitting in front of a keyboard and I'm going to start working on a pack. I challenge myself to make sure that I sound like a professional.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I would agree. So in your because yeah, like I never would have guessed, 10 years ago that like sample packs are going to become just as popular to be sampled as records. But it seems like it's happened really quickly. And it seems like the sample game has kind of moved almost exponentially. It's moving very rapidly. I'd love to hear your opinion on whether or not the sample composition game, sample packs, drum packs is oversaturated or not.
That's a good question, because I think, it's the same thing of when you hear other people flipping samples off of sample packs, right?
Yeah,
But it's the same thing as if somebody sampled a Bob James record that somebody else sampled 100 times.
I agree.
It's the same thing, right? So it's not a matter of what you're sampling. It's a matter of how you're sampling it, how you're flipping it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things to do is to take classic samples and reflip them.
Yes.
One, it teaches me how the original producer did it. But two, it forces you to create something different out of something that's already been used.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you're in the wrong game anyway. So saturation, sure, but it's just like digging for records, man. It's the same for me. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a million different, jazz fusion records out there that I'm gonna fucking chop the shit out of. Just like I could go in the studio and knock 4 or 5 of those out myself and put those out and have those be sampled a million times. It's the same thing.
Oh yeah.
It's literally the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I see people complain, but like, yeah, there's certain people who are naturally kind of like hip hop are going to bubble up to the top
Yeah.
via their work ethic, via their understanding of the genres that they're trying to make sample packs in. And I think that's what's separating people now. It's not how many packs you put out. It's more like how much do you respect the sound that you're trying to create? You know, like things are getting to the point now where it's like, yo, dudes are literally hiring fucking choirs
Yeah.
and going into old churches to make gospel samples for you to.
Yeah.
I'm like, I never thought it would get that far that quickly.
Yeah.
But again, they're gonna stand out more than someone else who's trying to just do it at the keyboard by themselves. You know,
Yeah.
and that's great. Let's take a break and we'll be right back. Quick announcement. Over the last several years, we've been asked many times by the listeners of the show if we would ever open it up to the public for advertising. We've always been interested in this, but we never had the systems in place to make it work properly. I'm proud to announce that we are officially accepting advertising from the public on Super Duty Tough Work. Meaning, if you're a small business owner or an artist and you'd like to create more awareness about your product, service, or release on the Super Duty Tough Work podcast, we're now in a position to do that. For more information, email us at superdutytoughwork@weightless.net. Again, that's superdutytoughwork@weightless.net. Email us there. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you would like to promote, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible to let you know if we think it's a good fit and what the next steps are. Thank you for your time. Back to the show. Are you an artist who has the talent to succeed, but has a hard time executing? Do you have the will to win, but lack the plan? Are you tired of having great ideas that never come to fruition, or starting new projects but never finishing them? If you answered yes to any of these questions, reach out to me at superdutytoughwork@weightless.net to book a one-on-one coaching call. Tell me a little bit about who you are, what you're trying to do, and I'll see if I can be of service to you. Have a great day. All right, folks, we're back. Super Duty Tough Work, the most infamous podcast on planet Earth. We have an interview this week. I hope you aren't enjoying it with producer Rob Viktum. And, I want to ask Rob in this section, because we spoke about just like the technical side of making samples, composing, studying. And I know we have a lot of artists and producers who listen to us. And so I'd love to hear you give just a couple pieces of advice on just like composition, because you're somebody who not only makes boom bap beats, you make compositions, you make drum packs. It takes something different to do each one of those well. And I'd love to hear you just give a couple pieces of advice. Like, what would your piece of advice be to producers who are listening to this to just make your shit sound better, etc.?
First and foremost, don't worry about the quality of the sound at first. Just start. And no matter how corny or how cheesy it sounds with your first couple of tracks that you're putting together, as in multi-track for one composition, stick to your guns and keep building on top of it. If by the 7th or 8th track you still feel like it's trash, dump it and move on. But don't stop doing something just because it sounds cheesy at first.
Yeah.
You gotta trust your ear. If this is something that, if you're chasing a specific sound, remember that those records are not built off of one sound. Those records are built off multiple tracks,
Mm.
sometimes 24, 30 tracks for one song.
Mm.
So just because you're laying one piano note down and it doesn't sound like something that somebody would, the alchemist would sample, keep pushing,
Yeah.
because it's more than just one note.
Mm. Yeah, I'd agree. Like layering is I had that same issue when I started kind of getting into trying that. It was like I'd get to an idea and the first track through the main melody, I'd be like, yeah, this is kind of whack. It sounded so good in my head, but I gotta play the piano. It's just not hitting. And then, like you're saying, I would just sit there though. Okay, let me play it in with this instrument as well. And you keep adding to it and layered to it. And I think it's very important because yeah, you'll give up on an idea that's really dope because you didn't take the time to layer it and keep adding on to it.
Yeah.
When I think that's great advice. What advice do you have to people about just like programming drums?
Mm. uh, this is where I'm such an Akai person.
Yeah.
The swing is so important,
Yes.
right? The key to it for me, and this is just for me, but the key to it for me is a percentage of the swing that is just enough to match what my rhythm is,
Mm-hmm.
but to keep me in place.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Tight, but not too tight.
Correct.
Or loose, but not too loose.
Correct.
Right.
Both are right.
Right.
Yes. I don't want a robot making my beats.
Yeah.
You gotta be as human as possible.
Yeah.
What do they say on Blade Runner? Something about human is human. Something I can't remember. But that's what it is.
Yeah. And that's great advice. Yeah, because
stop sampling the same fucking snares. Find different snares.
Yeah, that's key. That's key. Yeah. So what about like you also do a lot of work with MCs. And it feels like lately you've definitely been more active working with rappers and doing like full-length albums with them. What has kind of driven you towards that? Like working with MCs more heavily right now? Because you've worked with bigger rappers, but it seems more like you got guys like who you are investing in and kind of molding and,
Yeah. So, I look at, the work I did, early on, like one of the records that you're on had Conway on it.
Yeah.
Like that was very early in his career. Right.
Yeah.
So records like that, the Shoot the Messenger album, that kind of introduced me into the world of working with bigger names than myself. Right.
Yeah.
And so you expect a certain quality out of things. But then you get tainted throughout the world whenever you're working with people and you find out they're not exactly who they say they are. And I find it easier to work with people that are talented and direct them in the way that they should be directed, like a producer. I like to be a producer. I don't want to be just a beat maker. I want to be a guy that influences the record, that guides the record, that is the ship captain, that takes the ship out into the night and it comes back with a hot joint, I've, like recently, I've got, I also like to work with people that I like, that I genuinely like as people. Those usually make the best records.
That's a fact.
So I have a full-length album coming out with Sean Boog from the Away Team. He's on Jamla Records' Ninth Wonders album or label. And he and I just hit it off. And I would send him like 2 or 3 joints. And the next day I'd have 2 or 3 joints back in my email. And we did that for 3 or 4 weeks, and we have like this incredible record. But we had some features that never showed up.
Mm.
You know, we just waited and waited and waited. But I'm working with some of these new guys that I've got here in Texas that need some shine
Mhm.
because they're legit, like they're real dope. And so I told Sean, I was like, look, I want to kind of put some shine on these dudes. And he was like, let's do it.
Yeah,
And so they're going to be on that record.
that's dope.
You know, like we grew up in a time where sometimes people would pick you up and put you out, or sometimes you just had to do it yourself. And I like working with people that I like. And so if I can help them, I will.
Yeah,
And so putting out records with people that I like is a lot easier than just working with people just because they want beats from me.
yeah,
And I won't put out records just as single. I don't put out, people ask me for beats. One, I don't sell my beats.
yeah,
Two, I only do full projects. So I'm either doing an EP or I'm doing a full length,
yeah.
because and that's me growing up with Gangstar.
Right, right.
One producer just makes for me, it makes a better sounding record.
I agree.
And that's the whole process. Like sometimes I'll go, you know, like maybe a year or two without putting out a record with a rapper, just because I haven't found anybody that I'm inspired to work with.
Yeah, that's dope. So what do you think about, like, because a lot of guys in your lane who've worked with the guys you've worked with, um, it seems like they play the I guess I'll call it the placement game. Like, you don't play that game. Is that
No,
just due to the experiences you've seen, just doing it like you've done it for like your record with like your production record and working with these people? Did that kind of turn you off from even going down that lane? Or was it something else just in general?
the record business is total shit. It sucks. And I don't want to chase. I don't give a shit about getting a record deal. I don't
Yeah.
care. I would rather put stuff out myself, stuff that I like, take the risk myself,
Mhm.
than, you know, like, I don't, would I love it if some big name rapper chose something that I did? Sure. But what I do doesn't change. Just because they're a big rapper doesn't mean that I'm not going to just say, hey, you can use one of my beats, but I have to do the whole record.
Right.
You're not going to get one off of me, you know? So like, I don't bend for those type of things. And so for that reason, I don't chase that shit, because I know the reality of that is very slim
Mm.
until I position myself into a situation where it makes sense
Yeah.
for somebody to use me all the way. That's bigger.
Yeah. No, I love that the approach, because I think one thing I don't like about this era of production, especially many of the platforms that talk about production, is they focus a lot on placements, placement, and they do not speak enough about working with people who are right next to you, who are dope, who it's so much easier to work with, and it would benefit both parties. It's like a concept we talk on this show about, and we call it networking horizontally, you know, as opposed to vertically. And a lot of producers, they're always trying to network vertically. Like, if I could just get this beat to him, and they're always looking up this mountain. If that guy just chose one beat, I'd make it. Because we hear these stories of one guy getting a beat and he just was but it's like, it doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of politics that went into that, and you don't know how many things didn't get chose by him, or got taken off the record, or how long he sat around waiting to get paid for that one placement. By then, you could have done 10 records with an artist that's right there and developed them, and then if that artist blows up, like, there's no bigger example of this right now in our lane than the Griselda guys, like in Derringer. Like, he worked with them when no one knew them. He was their in-house producer before the Alchemist wanted to work with him, before all these people wanted to do beats with him. He did it, and he established their sound.
Ground
And
level.
yeah, ground level. And because they went out there and they put in the work and then the sound took off again, now everybody wants to work with them. They can get beats from everybody, but without him doing what he did, they never would have got to that point.
Nope.
You know? So yeah, I think it's smart. I like what you're doing. And I would definitely recommend anybody at home doing it. I mean, look, my career is the same thing. You know, I started doing beats. I didn't do any beats for anybody outside of my crew for a long fucking time. It was just a Logic record, a Logic record, a Logic record, Greenhouse, 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 then my record, my record. And I think that's what taught me the most as a producer. And I think that's what people are missing out on. Like, doing a single for somebody doesn't teach you how to make an album.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you are going down a path that is going to be rewarding. All it would take is one ball to bounce your way with one of those guys you work with. Whole thing blows. And you're just sitting there with 2-3 albums in the vault with them. Like, let's keep going. And you're the next fucking. Oh, yeah, he's just like Derringer. They're new Griselda. These guys from Texas. You're like, yeah, because he didn't chase that thing, that shiny object over there, you know?
Yep.
But no, I think that was the last thing I had, man. So overall, what do you? I was gonna ask you, like, what do you get the most out of, just like in terms of the joy you get from the game? I would say, is it working with people, or is it just working by yourself in a studio just to create things?
The greatest joy. Well, it's a couple of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as somebody that is heavily influenced by indie hip hop culture and indie production and things like that, like the simple fact that you and I are having a conversation right now makes my inner child super excited.
Well, thank you.
Because I've always been a fan and looked up to you for so many years. And finding out that you're cool makes it extra great, you know, because sometimes that is not the case.
Yeah.
And the end result of something that sounds good coming together to sound good is the best thing. So whenever you make a beat and it's like, oh man, this is woo, this is nasty.
Yeah.
And then you send it to somebody and they return something nasty, that's the best feeling in the world.
That's dope.
Makes me feel like I picked up that daily operation record in New York City again.
That's beautiful, man. See, yeah, we can't top that answer. We're gonna end it. That's it, folks. Good night. We're out. No, tell the people where to find you at, and tell them what you got coming up this year.
My website,
yeah,
www.robviktum.com. Viktum.
I was gonna say
Ktum. Had to add that rap spelling to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can get t-shirts, merch, that type of stuff, but also all my sample packs.
Mm-hmm.
I've got, it should be on streaming any day now, but 2 cats that I've been working with out here in Austin. One kid named Nathan Mosaic, who is just insane.
Yeah.
And this cat named Big Nothing.
Okay.
Who's down with the crew in Houston called the Neot.
Okay.
Which are just incredible artists. So we've got an EP out called the Dory and Terry Chronicles.
Dope.
And it's a homage to Terry Funk and Dory Funk, some notorious Texas wrestlers. Those that know me know that I'm a huge wrestling fan as well as a hockey fan. But
nice.
I'm doing multiple EPs with all of these artists that I think are super dope in Texas, and they're all going to be Dory and Terry Chronicles. So Volume 1, Volume 2, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I've got probably 3 or 4 of those coming out this year. I have the album with Sean Boog coming out. I have an EP with Rim, which was one of Sean Price's artists. I have a new EP with my brother FU from Queens, who's top 5 rapper on the planet, in my opinion. And my man Chubbs from Brooklyn doing an EP. We're almost done with that one. Trying to think what else. I know I'm missing something. Me and the homie Passport Rav got something cooking right now too. And my man UFO Feeve, we're doing an EP as well.
Okay. That's dope. See, it's a lot of work getting put in. Especially you're not doing singles. You're like, nope, EP, album.
Yep.
No, that's dope. Oh, and if you're at home, what's your Instagram handle for everybody?
Just Rob Viktum. ROBVIKTUM, baby.
Yeah, and he posts a lot of dope stuff on Instagram. His TV show theme flips are very popular for a reason. They're crazy. So follow him on Instagram. And Rob, thank you for joining me today, man. This was dope. People at home, I hope you guys got something out of this. And we'll see y'all next week. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Super Duty Tough Work. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Follow the podcast on SoundCloud. Peace.
Shoot, I got styles already that's more complex that nobody know about. I mean, super duty tough work.